Alright everybody, time for another Round the World update. It's Thursday night. I've had a rough week here in the fish room. I honestly don't really even feel like shooting this video, but I feel like I need to get everybody caught up to date with what's been going on if you haven't been following along with all of the drama and the different sagas I've had been going on in different tanks. It's been a particularly bad week for my angelfish, and while we are starting here at my 29-gallon miscellaneous, the two key fish in this tank are indeed angelfish. And when I came in here to shoot this very impromptu Round the World update, I noticed immediately that my big dominant female here is showing that weird hyper-aggression. Well, I guess I can't call it hyper-aggression because angelfish can actually be really, really aggressive when they want to be. But this is definitely a display of dominance that I get from time to time. I don't know what's going on with it. I'm assuming it's a mating thing. Every now and again the hormones shift or something, and then this one becomes a little more aggressive and tends to sort of bully this one down into the corner and hiding behind rocks, and you know, it'll literally be sort of lying on its side on the bottom of the tank in one of those caves. And a few days later goes by and everything's back to normal and they're swimming around the tank getting along swimmingly, no pun intended. So I'm not going to worry about it. I've got so much stuff going on this week that's sort of coming to an end that this is the least of my worries. A little bit of aggression that I see and have seen regularly for quite a long time. This is just sort of part of the cycle of the way this tank works. You can also see that it's in due need for a water change. That's not anything unusual. See if we get a little bit of the display of aggression I'm talking about here. I guess not. So, other than needing a water change, nothing really going on in this tank other than that little bit of aggression. I figured I would mention that since, you know, it is something I just noticed is going on. So, moving on to my Grammie Tank. Excuse me. There is nothing really going on here to speak of in the Grammie Tank at all. It too is in need of a water change. What it's really in need of is a lawn mowing. I need to get in there and just hack back a bunch of this stuff. It's growing so thick, there's hardly any light getting in. You can see that the plant itself is so bunched up that it's not just sending roots down into the tank. There's whole plants that are beginning to develop down into the lower portions of this floating water sprite here. And then of course over on this side we've got all of my red tiger lotus once again is up near the top, probably protruding through the surface or up and out to the top. Doesn't look like it. Well, we're getting there. It's lying on the surface, so it won't be long before we've got new little shoots popping up and floating on the surface. You can see that water spray comes all the way down to this end of the tank. And it is quite bushy and thick at this end. Whenever I put the food in, I actually have to sort of wiggle it around with my fingers and smoosh it around, and so it goes down through the plant and sinks down into the tank. So you can tell all my sharks in there thought they were getting some dinner. So no fish losses in this tank this week, so that's good. Just basically in need of a water change and a plant grooming. I haven't changed filters on this tank in quite a while, so next time I get in there and do that, we'll probably do the full shebang. But not tonight. I'm not worried about that right now either. Alright, problem tank number one, my angelfish tank here. Several days ago I noticed my albino red-eye angelfish had some fuzzy stuff growing in some small patches on its upper body on both sides, just below the dorsal fin. So I began treatment and this, that, and the other thing. If you're really interested, check out the Angelfish Tank playlist and you'll be able to see all the videos of all the different updates I did and everything. Long story short is I wound up, well, I'm assuming we're going to lose the angelfish. For all of you that watched my last update and only watched the first half of it where I was talking about euthanizing the angelfish, when I got in there, if you had actually watched the whole video, towards the end I actually stitched on another piece of video. When I got in there to scoop it out to euthanize it, I found out that it was actually still alive and swimming. It had just sort of wedged itself upside down and it looked dead, but it was still alive and swimming, weak and listless, but it was still there with us. So I went ahead, I set up a hospital tank, I put it in there last night. As of the time I went to bed, it was lying on its I mean, it was sitting upright, but it was right at the surface. It still just didn't look good. It looked like it was floating more than swimming. This morning I got up, I shot a video actually saying this is going to be the final update because we were looking at a dead fish. We were doing sort of a little exterior post-mortem examination, and after about 30 seconds it twitched and flickered and it was apparently still alive. So back into the hospital tank it went. It is still there right now. It is barely with us, but it is still technically alive. So my albino angelfish is still with us. Again, I really don't expect it to be for very long, but right now it actually is. And if you look right through there, I just noticed I've got another flower. That's a flower on my Anubias, that really bright white spot right there. So that's pretty interesting. So, I came in just about a half an hour ago, and to my disgust, I found my beautiful veil-tail angelfish dead and stuck to the power head in there. And so, she was dead. I mean, there was no questioning about, you know, it was kind of gross. So, she just went and got flushed. No video about that or anything, but she is gone. She was the mate to the albino. And she was already getting old. I mentioned about a month or two ago that I've been kind of keeping my eye on her. She was getting listless. Her scales were looking a little, you know, dull. She just definitely looked like she was showing her age and kind of winding down. And so I wasn't really counting on her being around too much longer anyway. But I believe it was the Pimafix that did her in. I don't know what it is about that stuff. I've used it twice now, and on both occasions I have had fish that I was not expecting to have any issues with suddenly die the day or two after I started using it. The last time I used it, I had a silver molly in the tank with the fish that had the white fuzz on it. So when I dosed the tank with it, the next day both fish were dead. The fish with the fuzz and the molly who had not been infected and was perfectly healthy and normal. So in this case, in this tank, I put the Pimafix in it, and within hours all of the fish were hovering around the surface like they were suffocating for air. Despite quite a lot of water circulation in this tank, they all looked like they were suffocating. That's why we've got this air stone in here, and the air stone seemed to help. But my veil-tail never really got back to swimming around in the tank. She, for 2 days, always stayed up near the surface. And then again today, I just found her stuck to that power head over there. So I'm done with Pimafix. I'll never use the stuff again. It smells lovely, and I might use it as an aromatherapy, you know, to freshen up a room or something like that. But as far as pouring it into my fish tank, unless I'm trying to euthanize a fish, I'm not going to be using Pimafix anymore. I just don't know what the deal with that stuff is. But, you know, let Pimafix sue me, or, you know, whatever else. If they have a argument they want to make, they can explain to me why my fish die every time I use their product. So that's all I'm going to say about the Pimafix and this tank as well. Oh, no, it's not. We did get the Chinese algae eater out of here. I believe that's what started the whole mess in this tank. Initially, I thought it was a columnaris outbreak. I did have that going on in another tank that we'll get to in a minute. But it turned out that I don't think that was the problem. I think it was actual physical injury from the Chinese algae eater, both causing stress and chewing on the side, you know, chewing on the slime coat, and I think that's where the whole problem started. So the Chinese algae eater is gone. Where it's gone to, you're just going to have to wait and find out. But we're going to move on from this tank, and we're going to get over here to another tank that's got nothing going on, so we can be pretty quick about this one. This is my Black Ghost Knifefish tank, and fortunately is one of the tanks that I've not had any issue whatsoever. Everybody's doing fine. I did a water change on it not long ago. I got a lot of that green slime cyanobacteria out of there. I got a lot of the green maiden's hair algae that grows in this tank out. My beautiful opaline gourami is still looking just awesome in there, hanging out, not having any issues with the tiger barbs. And we even did get to see a little bit of the Black Ghost Knifefish that this tank is actually named for, that we never ever see. But did a little dance for us the other day. It did the hokey pokey. It kept sticking its face in and out, grabbing at a little Sarah O'Nip treat tablet that I'd put in there. So we did get to see a little bit of it, and that was really about it. Otherwise, nothing going on in this tank. My native tank. This tank had issues with a columnaris outbreak, and it was fast and done. Everybody got patchy and fuzzy and sick and died, and it was just a disaster. I came down in the morning and would just get in there scooping fish out. Well, if you just saw that little darting motion right there, there he is. That is my Chinese algae eater. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but the other day, I wasn't even really particularly thinking about what can I do with that Chinese algae eater. It was just like the forehead smacking moment, like, duh, why don't you just put that stupid fish in this tank? I've been saying for a long time now that I want an algae-eating fish in this tank. I was trying to get an eastern stone roller. I don't think a stone roller does well with my water. Every time I've had one, they've all died. And so the other day, when I just walked past the tank, I thought, you know, I don't care about this being a true biotope. You know, I'm getting the Mayan cichlid out of here, not because it's not a true native for this area, but I'm getting it out of here because it's just an aggressive fish. It's a gorgeous fish, but it is an aggressive fish, and I just don't want it in the tank. So as far as being strict on some sort of biotope, I don't really care. You know, so having that algae eater in here is going to serve a purpose. It'll help keep the tank clean. It's definitely a rough and tumble enough fish that I don't think it's going to have any issues in this tank. And once I get the Mayan cichlid out of here, we can start building an actual community in this tank. And that Chinese algae eater will just sort of be like the oddball fish in the tank. So far, he seems to be doing fine. I can already see an improvement in the tank. He's got little scrapes and scratches here and there. You can see where the wood is starting to get cleaned up a little bit in patches and looking better. So this tank's going to be nice and clean here really soon. It's going to be all thanks to that stupid Chinese algae eater. So while I still say I would never buy another one, I'm not just going to get rid of this one either. I can put it to good use. And I don't begrudge the fish. I don't have any hard feelings towards this fish for basically killing my angelfish. It's a fish. That's, you know, it's what they do. If anybody's at fault, it's me for not feeding this fish properly and giving it its proper nutritional needs. You know, I'm the one that drove it to feeding off the slime coat of my angelfish. So the fish is not responsible. I am. So for those of you who have mentioned, you know, hard feelings towards this fish or whatever, I really don't have any. He's just doing what fish do, and it's not his fault. So as far as this tank goes, I'm not worried about all of the little minnows in here. I think we've got a dead one right now. Right there on the power head. There's probably more in there floating. Doesn't look like it at the moment. But you can see how banged up and torn up some of them are. I'm sure that's because of the Mayan cichlid. Until we get that Mayan cichlid out of here, I'm not too worried about what goes on in this tank as far as the minnows coming and going. Most of these were recently purchased at a bait and tackle shop. So if you think I'm being cruel by putting them in here, I promise you every one of those fish has had a much longer life by being in this tank that I put them in than they would have otherwise had, because anybody else bought them, they would have gone in a bait bucket, and within a few hours they would have had a hook through them and been out in a reservoir somewhere. So any way you slice it, these fish have had a longer life in my care, whether they get killed by that cichlid or not. And then once that cichlid is out of here, we'll start doing something. Again, we'll figure out some sort of permanent residence, and we'll develop a little bit of a community. This little green sunfish right there, as beautiful as it is, that's going to have to go, because it's not going to be long before it's eating minnows. In fact, as fat as its belly is, I wouldn't be surprised if it already ate one of these little tiny, I can't even think of what they're called, rosy reds. Alright everybody, sorry about that. I honestly don't even know where we left off. I was in the middle of videoing and I heard a big crash coming from upstairs, so I just took off and ran upstairs to see what was going on. No idea what it was. I have no doubt that it had something to do with the new kitten and probably the dog, but I have no idea what got knocked over or whatever it was. It might even actually been the dog just crashing into something or whatever. But it scared the hell out of me. I thought there was some serious crashing going on upstairs, so I darted up there, and now I've completely lost my train of thought. So long story short with this tank is, as always, stay tuned. There's going to be more to come, and eventually we are going to work our way into having a stable community that's going to live in this tank long term. I think we were talking about getting rid of this little green sunfish here, so that's about it. We're going to have to get rid of him and move on from there. So moving on, Snail Tank is just a Snail Tank. No need to talk about that. My Gudgeon and T-bar tank is another tank that, fortunately, nothing really to talk about on this one this week. Haven't done anything new, haven't changed anything. I've just been feeding everybody. No more aggression between the two of those. I guess because of the rainbow fish being taken out of the tank, there's enough room, and the plants are starting to grow in nicely now that I've got them out of the substrate and more or less established on the rocks. The T-bar is not digging the plants up, and with all the additional plant cover, I think it just makes the tank a little more secure, and the gudgeon can lay low, and it actually spends quite a bit of its time just kind of hanging out on the leaves like that. Actually, speaking of the devil, it looks like it does have a little mark on its forehead, but that could be from banging into a rock or anything. I don't necessarily know if that's aggression from the T-bar or not. Haven't seen any aggression towards them, haven't noticed anything unusual going on, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But all in all, this tank is just ticking over, you know, no problem, nothing going on. So we're going to move on because I know this has already been a long video and we still got plenty to go. My 125 gallon tank. This is another one of those tanks that had issues. My room is still all boogered up with junk and clusters, so we can't really stand too far away and have a look at the tank. This tank had an outbreak of ick, and I got it because I brought my tilapia, which is right here, from the native tank into this tank without really thinking about it, and I brought ick over from the native tank apparently, because shortly after moving it I had an outbreak. So I did some salt treatment a little bit. Can't go too much salt with some of these fish, but I did a little bit of a salt treatment. I began using the all-natural product Ick Attack. I've never had an issue with that product. It's always worked well enough for me. But the outbreak of ick was so sudden and so severe that it was starting to make me a little nervous that the Ick Attack wasn't going to work quickly enough. So I ran the temperature up to about 90 degrees. And that killed most of the ick off. Within a day, almost all of the spots had gone away. And then a couple days later, I was still seeing, maybe 2 days later, I was still seeing some spots on a couple of the loaches in here. Just a few, and then I had 1 or 2 spots that were still left on the fins of my Tenopoma there. So I ran the temperature up to 90 degrees a second time and left it there for about 4 hours, and then ran it back down to 85 and left it at 85 for another 3 or 4 days. And I have not seen a trace of ick since. I did a water change afterwards. I got the salt out of the tank. Very important if you're going to do that. If you're ever going to get your temperature up above, let's say 80 degrees, 81 degrees, you get above that and it's time to put an air stone in the tank. The warmer water gets, the less oxygen it can hold. Colder water actually holds much more oxygen than warmer water, and when you get up to mid 80s, you basically have to provide it with as much gas exchange as you possibly can to keep introducing new oxygen into the water, because it just does not want to hold oxygen at that temperature. So if you're going to run your tanks really warm, you really need to put an air stone in them. So be warned, if you're ever going to do any kind of heat treatment for ick, you really need to make sure you've got an air stone in the tank, or there just won't be enough oxygen for the fish to deal with it. So we got through that problem. No sweat, no losses. Everybody was all right. And I will say to all of you who have pointed out how amazing and gorgeous this tilapia is, I am in 100% total agreement with you. I am tickled pink with this tilapia. It has turned out to be such an amazing fish. It is so pretty. It's kind of a pain in the butt because it's a brute on the plants. This tank always kind of struggled to have plants in it in the first place. And now you can see the green twig in front of us. That's all that tilapia. I used to have a bunch of floating stuff that I was trying to let develop. You see what I got now? All that stuff that half of it looked dead, it was all just floating pieces of water spray and all that, that's gone. And that's that tilapia. That tilapia has eaten all of that. So my hopes of ever having that beautiful green canopy in this tank, of having, you know, the way I used to with all of that floating water sprite in there, those days are just gone. We're not going to be seeing any. That's not aggression. Well, I mean, I suppose maybe it is to a small degree, but I see that all the time, that catfish. It's just, I think of that as sort of the old man, get off of my lawn, you kids, kind of aggression. It's not anything I take seriously. He sort of chases everybody around for a moment like that, and then he just goes back to hanging out. That's just entertainment as far as I'm concerned. I got to see my catfish darting and dashing around the tank a little bit. So my days of hoping to get that nice, beautiful green canopy back are just gone. I don't really think, as long as that tilapia is going to be in the tank, that we're going to be able to ever see the kind of vegetation that I would like to see in here. I do have the possibility of adding some more Java and Anubias to this tank, and maybe greening it up that way a little bit, because this tank really does look naked and stark to me. I really do like a nice lush green plant, or a nice lush green planted tank rather. My native tank is a bit of a difference, you know, that to me wouldn't look right with plants in it. To me, my native tank in my mind has always been plant free, but every other tank I have, even my brackish tanks, I like to have plants in them. So we'll see what we can do with this one, but as long as that tilapia is in there, like I said, we're not going to be able to do too much with the plants. Moving on to another one of my tanks. Speaking of my brackish tanks, this is my brackish tank that's got my figure 8 puffer in it. I've fed him twice today, but you can already see him thrashing around up here in the corner because he's a little piggy and always wants to eat no matter what I do and no matter how often I feed him. So he's fine. He doesn't need to eat or anything. Don't let him fool you. He's lying to you about being starved to death. You can see his fat belly. I got a couple of bumblebee gobies in here. I got a couple of little endlers, guppies in here, and that's about it. Nothing really going on in this tank to speak of either. So we'll move down here to my quarantine tank. And I actually do have stuff to talk about with my quarantine tank. My big chain pet store's got neons on sale for $1 a piece again. So I bought 20 of them the other day. And I've already lost some, but they're in the freezer, and I will be getting my money back for them. The sale goes on till almost the end of the month. So we are going to be stocking up on neons. And once I've got a whole bunch of them, and they've been in quarantine for a while, we can go around and sprinkle neons in some of the tanks that I have that don't have big predatory fish in them. And pretty soon we'll have lots and lots of nice bright sparkly colors swimming around in some more of my tanks. So look forward to that. I've also got, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the silver hatchet fish are still in here and they're still doing well. So provided that they continue doing okay once everybody gets out of quarantine, the hatchet fish will go over to my Angelfish tank and join the 2 hatchetfish or 3 hatchetfish that I have swimming around in there now. So I will actually have a nice little school of hatchetfish in the Angelfish tank. But that's all going to be after everybody makes it through their 6 or 8 week quarantine period. So look forward to that. Alright, last but certainly not least, my red clawed crab tank. I think this is probably my longest marathon round the world update ever, and it's one I didn't even want to shoot. So this is my red claw crab tank. Not a lot going on as far as anything I've done to it this week. I did a basic water change and filter change, and that was all. I am going to be doing some more work on this tank here pretty soon. I'm going to have to get in and pull the filters out and clean all the gunk out of the inside of the filters. This is a really, really dirty tank between these crabs and then all these little fish in here. I did go through recently with the net and I collected up all of the endlers females. I gave a few of the males to a friend of mine because he needed a little splash of color in one of his tanks. So I got rid of all the females. We just saw them in my quarantine tank, so they're probably going to be dropping more babies in the quarantine tank. They might find homes somewhere else. They might be food fish. I don't know what's going to happen, but I did finally get the females out of the tank here. And now we've got all male endlers in this tank, and we don't have to worry about the population explosion again. All the females have been separated. Again, unfortunately, all the females have also been impregnated, but they're not going to keep being impregnated, so we'll, not worry too much about that. Did also get in, and if you remember from not long ago, if you follow along with all my videos, you can see this rock right here was covered in that really nasty, stinky, red cyanobacteria that I've had in other brackish tanks. I don't know why, but I only get that stuff in brackish environments. It must be the salt. It has something to do with it. I don't know. But I've never had that in any of my freshwater tanks, only my brackish tanks. And my marine tank, actually, so that it must be something to do with the salt. I had a marine tank a long time ago. Marine tanks just really aren't my thing, so we don't need to talk anymore about that. But I did get in, and I cleaned that rock a little bit. I simply lifted that slime off in one big, gross, disgusting sheet and flushed it down the toilet and washed my hands thoroughly when I was done. So that's about it as far as really getting in there and cleaning the tank. As I said, I did a simple water change and filter change, but nothing more. So that's about all that's going on in the red-clawed crab tank. And we are back to where we started at the 29-gallon miscellaneous. So once again, I apologize for the marathon video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you're not already. That way you won't miss anything else I got coming up. There's always something going on down here. Plus I got stuff going on upstairs and tanks up there too, and you don't want to miss any of that. So thanks again for watching. Sorry for the length. See you real soon in the next one.